So there was an article recently talking about how even though Biden is in charge, the Republicans could rig an election in 2024. So because of the laws built into the Constitution, in a sense, being part of America is still not safe. Hannah Miyamoto uh, of the Cal Liberation Action Committee. What was the article that you saw, and what is this? What does it mean to Californians?
Hi there. Okay, Marcus. Let me just do a brief. The specific topic. I think was really handled really well by a man named Cody Fenwick, who is the editor for Alternet, and he was writing and published in rawstory.com. I'll just briefly show everybody the. This is the article for everyone. Let's see. Hope that's it. Does that work? Oh yeah. Sorry, everybody. We're learning how to use this technology. Let me try one more time.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll just do this way, and then I'll be able to show you all. So this is it. The article here, as you can see, is called "Trump Couldn't Steal This Election." One. It was posted today, 18 hours ago. So I guess it was posted early in the morning. Anyways, 15th of December, 2020. We are currently broadcasting 9 o'clock in the evening in California on the 15th of December. And the basic point of this article, Marcus, is that if the Republicans were to gain control of the House of Representatives in the 2022 elections, then they would be in a position to basically declare whoever they want to be, basically declare the Republican candidate to be president of the United States in 2024, regardless of actually how people vote, which is, you're going to say, is nuts. And I would say that too, except for the fact that we are currently in a situation where people are talking, well, conservative Republicans, the Michael Flynn's, the Stephen Miller's, the Wells, they're all talking about how we're just going to, they're basically, the voters are just going to be ignored, and boy, it'd be much better if we just make Trump the president of the United States. Because after all, he really, they're going to say, well, because they claim that he really won the election, it was all fraud, blah, blah. So therefore, we should just ignore voters and just do whatever we want. And also, that's not the only example of where Republicans have, I'll make that partisan statement, where they've basically used the power they had rather than respect the traditions of the United States. So maybe I should make that briefly clear to everybody again. The decision what we're talking about here is the possibility the Republicans would win the House in 2022. They win control. Remember, they gained about at least 10. They gained at least 9 seats this year in 2022. In 2020, currently there are 2 seats still to be determined. So they could gain up to 11 seats already. And their majority right now is would actually then, the Democratic majority would then shrink to as little as 9. Currently, there's a 11-seat majority. Okay, there, Marcus. You sort of froze up on my screen.
So what I think I'm hearing is that traditionally, in a presidential election, the very next midterm election, it goes to the opposite party who won the presidency. If that's the case and tradition follows, then given Joe Biden won this 2020 election, the midterm elections would switch to the Republican Party. We add on the fact that the House already has a substantial growth in Republican seats, way more than what anybody ever thought was going to happen. And then you have an increase in voter interest in the Republicans as the traditional rebuff in midterms. Republicans in 2022 might actually gain control of the House. And if that happens, they would be able to use the replacing the electoral college system with votes directly by the legislators, as I think pioneered or at least popularized by what I would lovingly call the hijinks of Rudolph Giuliani and the Orange One. Is that roughly what's going on?
Right. They would they would have right. I mean, we'll go a little more detail because I know this is really complicated stuff for people to get on a YouTube channel. But yeah, that the idea is that the Republicans would have the power to decide who could become president of the United States. Basically, let's put it that way. And therefore, the question would be, would they use that power? Well, the trouble as we're seeing is, of course, that under the rule of Donald Trump, is that if you're not with him, you're against him, and he just sort of insists that if you're not loyal to me unless you're doing everything to make me keep me president, right? I mean, he demanded in the state of Georgia that the Georgia governor call a special session, for instance, just so that they could, deny the governor, the election in Georgia, right? That's just
Right.
one example of what we're kind of talking about. So extraordinary measures would be taken because they'd have the power to do so. There's also another piece to this, though, which has to do with reapportionment. That the 2020 census is supposed to be certified. In fact, it's supposed to be certified by the end of this month, but legally, I think it's supposed to be certified by the end of this month. It should get done before Biden becomes president. And there is, of course, the controversy that the Trump administration has raised for the first time about whether or not you include undocumented citizens or residents,
Right.
for purposes. But the point is, for everybody who's not too familiar, every 10 years, the United States gets there's a census being conducted, and that determines that nothing else. It determines the population of the country in each state. That information is used to determine how many members of Congress are how many representatives there are from each state, is what that basically does. Currently, California has 53 members of Congress because of its population relative to the rest of the country.
Right. But if its population was to lose count, meaning the 2 to 3 million undocumented visitors, the highest anywhere in America, then those seats would go to a conservative state and they would lose blue seats, increasing the chances of a Republican House, I think is what
Right, right. Experts will say that it predict the best expert. Expert opinion is that basically there's like 3 seats that might be there, and the winners would be states that are dominated by that don't have a lot of minorities in them. States
right.
like Minnesota, for instance. But the other thing to remember is that the Supreme Court particularly has really done a number as far as allowing state legislatures, state governments to design their districts about any way they like. And as a result, it's called gerrymandering. Those people who are not, familiar with that term.
Right.
So the question therefore becomes how many state legislatures, how many state governments are in the hands of a Republican party, and how many are in the hands of the Democratic Party, and how many are divided between the two parties, so that there'd have to be some kind of compromise. In other words, where is there not going to have to be a compromise as far as determining, that mandate? Because North Carolina being one of the great examples of this, where the Democrats should have several more seats from North Carolina than they do, solely because Republicans control the state government.
Right. And the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken, in the last year upheld 2 different gerrymandering schemes that benefited Republicans. That would be the conservative dominated Supreme Court. So it looks likely that they will gerrymander and that they will be legally enshrined to do so.
Well, let's everyone understand now what this is. Now we're talking about, this is not just any old hat. These are latest numbers, okay? Based on what we know. Like I just said, there's 2 House seats that are still in fact in play.
All right.
But currently, uh, the Democrats control. This is the amazing thing, I think. There are 50 states in the union. 37 of those states are controlled by one party or the other, in the sense of, in 37 states, one party controls the House, the Senate, the state House, the state Senate, and the governorship.
Right.
Pretty amazing that way, but that's kind of shows the polarization of our politics.
Right.
Democratic Party controls 15 states that way. Republican Party controls 23 states that way. Maybe for the fun of it, we can explain. I can briefly list off those states. Democratic control. This is 3 things, right? 2 House, Senate, and governorship.
You see the map before you do the list. I think it'll help people to absorb it.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no map. I had to go out and compute the data. So I'll just briefly list it: Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Hawaii, Virginia, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Maine, and Rhode Island are, and you have complete Democratic control. Republicans control 23 states: Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Vermont. No, Utah. Sorry, Utah, Arizona, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and New Hampshire. Now, as you might have briefly heard there, you might have noticed that only, however, even though the Republicans control 23 states compared to the 15 states the Democrats control, you might have noticed that only 2 states have real large populations, which are Florida and Texas. And as a result, by my count, I would estimate 160 House seats are going to be determined by a Democratic Party controlled government,
Okay.
while 178 seats are going to be determined by a Republican controlled government. However, gerrymandering isn't quite, it's not, I might, however, say that I think the Republicans have an advantage beyond that 18 seat difference, because it's really easy to gerrymander when the Democrats control all their votes in, major cities, while Republicans tend to spread their votes out across the whole state, and it becomes harder to play foolish little games with that. So although if you gave complete control, and we'll really see what happens. Anyways, so those are the numbers. So I guess the question will be, we always do talk about independence. So anyway, maybe I was jumping ahead. So 2020 by 2022, we'll have a whole new reapportionment of Congress. Okay, that's number 1. So the question will be, therefore, what could happen in 2024? The way it works, I'll explain what's called the election. What's it called again? The Electoral Count Act. Public Law 4990, 24, whatever. It's called the Electoral Count Act. It's been amended a little bit too. But what it does, it basically, it sort of helps out the Constitution as far as how the electoral votes actually are counted, and under what that gives different options for different situations. Maybe the most spectacular example we could talk about, I think, for 2024, it happened. States issue different electoral votes. In other words, parallel slates.
Okay.
How could this happen? Well, 1876 is the last time where this was, and I was reviewing some of that history. This is the great Rutherford B. Hayes versus Samuel Tilden race, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. And in that case, 3 states, I think it was Florida, South Carolina, I want to say Alabama, doesn't matter, 3 southern states. There was a great deal of violence. The Ku Klux Klan obviously was in full swing, and there was election fraud going on, true electoral fraud, not voter fraud, but things like they printed ballots in a way so that illiterate people were likely to vote for the wrong candidate. Stuff like that, because
Yeah.
there were a lot of slaves, former slaves, who were illiterate, so they, there was a lot of fraud. Anyways, what happened was the government machinery went along. So basically, Democrats in those states held their own electors, and they had certain state officials signing off the certificates, which is what the formal way it's done, saying that the electoral votes had been granted to the Democratic candidate, and then others. There's also Republicans. And anyways, the point is that this never went to the 12th Amendment. They never used the 12th Amendment on it. What they did was they, because they just, the 2 houses, the Democrats controlled the House, I believe, the Republicans controlled the Senate. And so what they did was they agreed to form an electoral commission, so basically what they did is they compromised. They did a compromise. They sort of said, we don't know what happened, but they basically decided the presidency of the United States. And what they actually did, the deal really was Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, became president of the United States. And then they agreed to remove the Southerners. What the Southerners won was the removal of federal troops from the South. And so then they were able to, terrorize black people some more. So this is what happened in 1876. So now we are talking about a different situation, but you could sort of see what would happen if that's an example. I think that's important to say. That's an example of what you're talking about. If the House, in that case, the House and the Senate were in different parties, but they made a compromise, which, let's see.
But you're saying there is a some sort of legal precedent somehow in American history for you have the Electoral College, and then a series of states in the Congress can say, well, we want to nominate our own electors independent of the Electoral College, and there's some sort of something of the Constitution.
Well, it's not quite like that. Oops, sorry there. Yeah, there. We lost you there, everybody. Okay, no, actually, no, let's clarify a little bit. If you haven't followed the news, everybody here on YouTube land, certain Trump supporters, well, led by, Stephen Miller is one person involved in this little scheme, have tried to pretend that they had Republicans won the state, and they appointed Republican Party officials, basically, to cast electoral votes. In the case of Georgia, they actually held the Republican electoral vote in the state house, in the Georgia state house, at the time as a Democratic one. The legitimate Democratic one was the one that covered, and it was kind of funny where they were like, we had a vote, and everyone, what happened? What are you talking about? And it was going on exactly upstairs in another conference room. But now, all right, so that sounds pretty bogus. But you could sort of see that you could see this was an 1876 type of scenario where this actually happens. Republicans, let's say in a state that a Democratic candidate has won, had the presidential nominee has won, that they could, decide to have these electors submit the document, ship it up to Washington, and when it's ceremoniously opened up, if you have both House and Senate in the control of the Republican Party, they could decide, I think we like those electoral votes better.
Oh, okay. Okay. So if Republicans have a good amount of state legislatures, governments under the control, and if they gain House seats, then giving them a theoretical control of the House and the Senate, it would be possible for congressional Republicans in the House Senate to accept a scheme by state Republican controlled legislatures to accept this alternative elector votes.
Yeah, or just frankly, look at the case of Georgia, just simply alternative electoral votes.
Okay. 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 Hey, yeah. All right. Yeah, there's a lot to it, but
So
if the
it's
midterm elections
complicated.
show Republicans and they play hijinks with getting undocumented people not counted, and they're able to do gerrymandering, it would be possible for them to dominate the House in 2022 and retain control of the Senate. And then in 2024, they would be able to say, oh, well, if Republican states want to not recognize the Electoral College, we'll let them do that. And we have an election for presidency in 2024 when Trump said he would run again, or someone worse, basically able to go through the same, what people viewed as almost a soft coup, where Biden was elected and Trump was saying, well, maybe I won't recognize that system of electing him. And I know that it was a shock to many people to learn that there was any sort of basis for that. And it turns out, as you have highlighted to me, the Constitution it's not working anymore. It has baked in these issues and problems. And there's this one where technically there's something to this dueling elector slates and the ability of House legislatures to choose. And that goes way back. Very scary. And you're saying this could be a reality again in the next few years, depending on what happens in 2022. Is that fair? Midterm elections?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I think the key is that maybe better understanding is that if the Republicans control the House today, we would now be talking about the possibility of recognizing Republican slates in states that the Democratic candidate won.
Right. Right.
And of course, all of this is totally not. Yeah, it's basically unprecedented. I mean, if you have to go back to 1876 for something, I think it's pretty clear it's unprecedented in the modern era.
Right.
Certainly in the modern era, an era, I mean, you and I know. I mean, like voting is nothing like it was in the 19th century, right? I mean, it's a secret ballot. It's all very regulated. It's all very open. You know what I mean, right? It's not a. It's a system where we know who won each state. I mean, that's not. The issue is, yeah, and then what happens after? I almost, frankly, think about. Supposedly, Joseph Stalin said he loved elections as long as he could count the votes. And that's sort of what we are sort of facing. It's like this is absurd and crazy, except for the fact that we're seeing something like it now. So,
Yeah.
and the question will be, yeah. And I think we should just conclude this by just saying, folks, um, watch this space. See what happens. 22, we're going to, obviously, Democrats could win the Senate, but of course, they're probably not going to hold on to the Senate in 2020, in 2022 either, even if they were to get that one vote. And who knows? There's just a lot of crazy things that could happen. But I think as co-advocates of California independence, my position has sort of shifted now. I'll tell that to YouTube land that my focus is now on 2025, and the reason being that if the Republicans carry the House, if we still have MAGA crowd and we still have Donald Trump insisting he really won the election and it was all stolen from him, on and on and on, if we have this idea that you're not a really, you don't, man, if you don't use your power, if you don't, you as Republican elected official, right? If you Republican official don't use your power to the absolute maximum theoretical level, to keep power, regardless of what democracy and the voters and everything else say. If you take your oath to the Constitution and you throw it over your shoulder, I guess maybe a better way of putting it, then we would be in a situation where 2024 could roll around, or 2025 could roll around, and we would have a president who not only did get a majority of the electoral vote, of the popular vote, but they didn't get a majority of the electoral vote either.
Mm. Mm.
And then we got a Congress that was gerrymandered into existence to make sure that Republicans win that. And then we got a Senate that only represents a minority of the people as well because of the fact of population distribution in the country. And at that point, I would hope that that a lot of liberal people who believe in liberal democracy would say, why are we around for this? This is at this point, it's time to think of something better. Because, remember, we, the liberal democratic majority, are still going to have the numbers. We're still going to have the economic power, the cultural power. We're going to be it. And that's not going to change. And it's going to be more extreme in 2025 than it would be today. So that's what I think that's why I encourage everyone to read the article by Cody Fenwick, and maybe do your own research, video, and see what you think about what we're crazy things saying. Write your comments down below, of course. We'd be glad to engage in a conversation with you. I will be glad to engage in a conversation with you, to maybe explain some of the finer points. And if you raise, because we've been talking about congressional reapportionment, the U.S., the census and how that affects, and whether or not, either the census and congressional reapportionment and the Electoral Count Act, I think it's called, right? The Electoral, the Counting Act. And
Yeah.
and then, of course, the overall environment in which we're in,
Yeah.
in which respect for institutions like the Constitution and like democracy are just being ignored. Or I should say, is the pressure is really on. Let's also not forget too, that a lot of Republicans now have received death threats from supposed Republican voters, Trump supporters, right? The governor of Georgia and the Secretary of State of Georgia, and right down to the person counting the ballots in the county election board. And they've had horrible threats being leveled at them. And this is 2020. And I guess that's what really, I just think that everybody in YouTube land should be thinking about is, where is the change going to happen? Because right now it seems like the situation is bad now and getting worse by the day. But again, things could be changing. Supposedly, Mitch McConnell, for instance, actually told his caucus not to mess around with Electoral College. So that's why he formally congratulated Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for becoming president, vice president, winning the election. That was intentional. That was him trying to put an end to this, because obviously he has other things to do, like, of course, sabotaging the Biden administration.
Okay. All right.
Right. So we want to get going. It's a half an hour, but like I said, this was a really useful half an hour, though, I think, because we covered a lot of things. We'll put links in the description below.
If we can, could we show them that map, whatever the map was that showed?
Okay. The one with the trifectas on it, if you will.
It was one of the links you had.
Okay. Well, we'll keep talking. And I think we're sharing, right now, right? Yeah, we are sharing. Let me go and flip this baby over to...
Yeah, it was one of the links you
Okay, Okay, this here is how the electoral votes are going to be
There,
allocated.
that
But
right there.
that's not the trifecta map, by the
Okay, well
way.
that's the one across the map.
That's the one. The trifecta map. Well, again, that's just it. I don't think there is one, unfortunately. Oh,
Yeah.
wait a second. Here it is. Okay, there it is, and I'll reduce it a little bit. So now everybody in YouTube land can go read that. Yeah, and you may notice it looks a lot like the presidential election results. You know, solid blue over here, right? Solid red over here and here, right? Utah red. This course, this
These
was a Biden state. This is,
these are
right?
state legislatures that are controlled by one party, effectively.
And governor.
And governor. Yeah. The whole state government of all branches, one party.
One party. That's right.
It's almost the all interior of America.
Right, but also look at the solid blue. Here and here's Illinois, here's Virginia, there's New York, there's Connecticut, Rhode Island, Jersey, New Jersey, and Maine. And those, yeah, like we said, it is 15 states to 23 states, but let's not ignore the fact that there's a lot of population in those 15 states.
True, but the Constitution gives equal power to all the states. So.
Oh yeah, yes. In the Senate, this is be that is true. And governor, Senate do tend to follow the same way, because when you think about it, they're both statewide elections, right? If you win the most votes in your state, you can become either governor or state or senator, right? U.S. senator. So they do tend to follow that way, as you know. I mean, this state now has 2 Democratic senators, and this state over here has got 2 Democratic senators, and this state over here has got 2 Democratic senators. So that goes like that. Okay. So we will, maybe, I guess we'll just put all the links and descriptions below that we've been talking about. Again, I think we've been, thank you for your time, and in this case for your attention. And I'm really pleased that we really, I think we really, we've actually moved along pretty well. All right.
This is an important topic, and when you brought it to my attention, I knew that it was something that people need to know, because it, as you pointed out, exemplifies the reason why California should consider secession, meaning that we are still in this American system, as you pointed, which is locked into a unworkable government based on the Constitution. So when you illuminated this idea to me, I was like, we need to let other people know. I can't be the only one knowing this. It's got to be something many Californians know. And thank you for breaking it down in a way that I think everybody's going to be able to get. I think people can watch this video and they can understand exactly what the threat is.
I just want to also point out, though, that it's not just California. Like, there's a number of states where you could have a Democratic majority. The electoral election has gone one way, and then we don't get the president that even the country voted for. So it's not just, there would be a lot of people who would be, a lot of people representing many tens of millions of Americans would be frustrated, and very much, and I think should be considering another option.
Good point.
Okay.
Well said.
All right. So, saying hello to you, Jersey, Virginia. We love you. Okay, and Washington and Oregon, Hawaii, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, Arizona. Yeah.
Like that Newsweek magazine cover.
Which one?
It was a Newsweek magazine cover by a producer out of Los Angeles, where he talked about California and a bunch of progressive states leaving and joining Canada. Oh
yeah, but I think the idea is that we got to do something, because our democracy is truly at risk, and because of the rising levels of violence, the rising levels of intimidation, and then on the other side is this unwillingness to respect the voters. Ultimately, this is what's really appalling. You have so many. I mean, let's not remember that what 126 members of Congress from the all Republicans signed on to the insane lawsuit that was brought to the U.S. Supreme Court by the state of Texas, and also
Yep.
17 Republican attorney generals. So they're just another example of anybody who says that, well, it's just politics as usual. I think clearly doesn't know what politics is and doesn't know what usual is. Okay. All right. 36 minutes into the hour. I think if you have no other questions, I think we can thank everyone for listening in.
Thanks, Hannah. I really appreciate it. Awesome interview.
See you soon.
Peace.